So like some of you, I got into watches and largely learned more about my enthusiasm through the power of this platform and other channels. The internet is a wealth of knowledge, heaving with enthusiasts willing to share their views. That's all well and good, and of course we're largely impressionable. We learn a lot through other people. We live vicariously through their experiences. And through this we've learned a lot about ourselves. As enthusiasts, the watches we appreciate, but I think we also have quite a few regrets. Roads not taken, maybe the roads that we did take that led us down the wrong way. But in large part, those lessons that you've learned have put you where you are now. Hopefully, I would imagine as a better person, as a better enthusiast, someone who has more knowledge. After being in the watch hobby for, I would say, 10 years at this point, there are definitely some areas, there's some things that I wish I had been told before I started. That would have made life a little bit easier, that would have maybe prepared me for things happening down the road. So that's what I've done today. Listed 10 things that I wish I had known before starting the watch hobby. Guaranteed there are hundreds of things that we should know, and I'm sure your input is going to be greatly appreciated. So any comment that you have, one of the most influential points that you think has affected you down the road, please share it with all of us. I think the first point, and this could be seen as the first and last point, is that we are never 100% truly satisfied. With the watches that we have, maybe. You've spent so many years trying to find that one ideal watch. You've found it, you wear it every day. It's incredible. But even still, subconsciously, you are still looking. I think it's something that dates back to our hunter-gatherer ancestors, that as enthusiasts, we love the chase. We love looking for the next thing. See, the issue with this hobby and so many others is that the goalpost is always moving somewhere else. So this notion of one and done, I think it's a beautiful sentiment. It's something to live for sure. If you can aspire to that and achieve it, then you have succeeded in life. Of course, with this example, I'm generalizing here. With a lot of these points, I probably will. I'm not saying it's impossible that you can't adopt the Zen Buddhist approach and retire with one incredible watch that does it all for you. Maybe a simple piece, maybe a highly complex one. But that level of satisfaction, will it be 100%? Will you never not look at another watch again? So I guess the thing I wish I was taught back in the day was not to set your sights on one watch and imagine it as your end-all, be-all. Because once you finally get there, you may find that it's not as ideal as you once imagined, and that there are plenty better options in other categories. So instead of fixating on one watch, I would say approach it with a more open mind. Enjoy the undulations, enjoy the peaks and the troughs of where this hobby takes you, because that's where the fun is. The next thing I wish I had known, don't buy watches to impress others. It's quite straightforward, but in a world that we live in today where social media and attention governs so much of people's day-to-day, it's very easy to fall into that trap to buy the watches and the brands that everybody likes. And on this point, we shouldn't lie to ourselves. We are all guilty of doing this, me included. Of course, I have a YouTube channel. There's a certain give and take about the watches that I can choose to buy and own and review. Do you put a watch on your wrist and say it's the coolest watch on the planet because I own it? Or do you put a watch on and say it's the coolest watch on the planet because I have been told so? And maybe in here there is some leeway. There is some give and take on both sides. I wish I'd been told that simple and timeless watches are a better choice, especially in the long run. Watches that you want to keep for a long time in the collection. The simpler, the less adorned, the better. I believe that complexity can generate problems down the line. That maybe a certain dial finish is not going to appeal to you in 2 years' time. That maybe a typeface is not appealing to you, or that the watch size is irrelevant. There is a reason why a handful of brands, a handful of their watches have become so sought after and are generally the top pieces to discuss. 9 times out of 10 we will realize that they are some of the most simple pieces, some of the most well executed, some of the most basic. Ones that maybe only have a date complication or a simple rotating bezel or a chronograph feature. Might also find that they lack any sort of color, sticking with a white dial or a black dial, which in the long term will add to their versatility. So instead of jumping at the watch that immediately appeals to you, maybe spend some time thinking about how the watch is going to be for you in the next 5 to 10 years. Do you think it's a style that's going to stay relevant? Do you think it's something that you will enjoy all the way down the line? The next thing, don't get another watch. Buy a better strap. So often, we spend time obsessing over the next piece. We maybe lose sight on the watches that we have. And it's so very easy to say that after 6 months you get incredibly bored of the watch and you decide to sell it to fund the next watch purchase. But I've discovered more than once a simple strap change, whether it's leather, rubber straps, NATO straps, maybe a different bracelet, can change the watch entirely and can make you look at it through a completely different lens. A simple strap change saves you the headache. But it also saves you a lot of money down the line when you start doing the calculations. Right, ignore the shirt change. I sweat through them like it's going out of fashion. The next thing I wish I had known. Watch brands don't matter. Of course, this can be open to your interpretation. A lot of us can be affected by a brand name, how it appeals to us, the heritage, the history, the storytelling behind it. But on a large scale, when you're spending so much money on a steel watch where you could be spending a tenth less, in there somewhere, I believe that there is a law of diminishing returns. And I think the real issue is that so many people don't look at the watch as a watch. They look at the brand first, then the watch to follow. And what happens is that the brand can influence your decision. Instead of you just appreciating the watch for what it is, what it represents, what does it do so well that its competitor doesn't? I think very often we can be blindsided by the brand name and not necessarily see the watch as something that could be far better offered by a competitor. So in contrast, that law of diminishing returns, that you're getting a watch that's going to be incredibly well made, functional, the timekeeping is going to be excellent across all of these different levels. The thing that separates these watches in the end is the design, and it's the brand. Spend more time appreciating the design of the watch, then factor in if the brand is important or not. The next thing, don't spend a lot of time buying cheap watches. Now, of course, cheap is a relative term. We all have our different opinions on what the word cheap means, where that factors in. But I see so many channels today harping on the idea of chasing after a $40 watch here, $100 watch here. I think the long and short of it is you're just not going to get the same level of enjoyment out of these watches that you can get from ones further up on the price ladder. The most important thing, though, that isn't often discussed is when you buy a cheap watch, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be using cheap materials. Like, for example, it's using stainless steel that could be inferior, that has an extremely high nickel content. It may even contain lead. In these sorts of metals that are very cheaply made, cheaply assembled, I guarantee you're going to have a bad time with the watch. Of course, construction is another thing. The water resistance might be terrible. The movement might break on you. The watch might be dead on arrival. So I think there is a limit when pursuing cheap watches. Watches that are high-end clones of other pieces. I would say it's far better to chase after a watch under a name that you can trust, as opposed to one that doesn't have a name, that's made in a back alley somewhere with inferior materials and all the rest. The next thing to play off of that is to buy quality. Go after a watch that's going to live longer than you, not only in its build and its construction, but also mechanically. You know it's sound. When you reach a certain price point in this hobby, the watches that you start wearing, you feel confident wearing, because you know whatever you throw at them, they'll take a licking and keep on ticking. I think I'll trademark that one. That's funny. To pursue and buy quality also does something else. Subconsciously, it's an achievement. It's something that doesn't happen every day. It's something you can pinpoint and remember for a very long time. And with that then, there is sentimentality attached. This fulfillment, this experience, it should be earned. It shouldn't be something that just lands in your lap every week, because where is the enjoyment in that? Spend less time buying cheap watches, spend a bit more time pursuing quality and appreciating it for what it is. The next thing, always have money put aside. For a couple of reasons. This could be its own category in itself. When something goes wrong with a watch, naturally it might need service. And as a lot of us know, service costs, the prices, they keep going up. It's better to have an account somewhere with a bit of money stored away for that rainy day when something might happen. So instead of spending more money on a new watch, put some of that money aside for when the time does come to eventually service a piece of yours. But point number 2, the reason why you put money aside is because lightning may strike. You never know if, when, how. Even if you're not looking for the watch, an opportunity might present itself that you never even thought of. Having that little bit of disposable money can come in handy when you least expect it. Whether that means you might have to get a watch serviced, or when a really great watch arrives that you were not expecting, basically whatever happens, you are ahead of the curve, and that's always a good thing. This is quite a common thing that we hear all too often, but it's worth repeating again. Don't chase trends. Do not buy hype watches. Trends are very much like fashion. In fact, I think fashion invented the trend. While it's happening, it's great, but in the background, they're already moving on to something else. Just because we can see what's going on, there's a very specific focus on, let's say, the integrated bracelet craze, doesn't mean it's going to last very long. And I think the last few years have shown us just how fickle trends are and how we lose interest, move on to something else. I just find it a shame, and this also links with the whole aspect of not buying a watch to impress other people, that so many get hooked into this trend buying phase. They ultimately spend 4 to 5 times more than the watch is worth, only to learn a few years down the line that the trend dies off. These watches are far more attainable, affordable, easier to find. If you can avoid it, do not get caught up in this. Ignore buying the hype And also try your level best to not pursue the watches that are brand spanking new that everybody else is chasing. And I think to tie it all up, the last thing that I really wish I had known is that there is always another great brand out there. Just spend time looking elsewhere. Don't stay so fixated on a handful of brands. Look to brands that you may have never considered before. This goes hand in hand with brand names not mattering as much as we would think. Like for example, the watch that I'm wearing. If I knew what I know now about Zenith watches 5-6 years ago, they would have been one of the first brands that I would have pursued. Same with so many other makes, whether it's German, Japanese, Swiss. Spend your time really digging into their history and looking at their back catalogue. Getting back in line with the first point that we are never truly satisfied, I think the whole point of looking elsewhere just makes this hobby all the more engaging and interesting. Being able to step off the beaten path and to appreciate a watch for what it is because you know it's great. Something that is simple and timeless, that has a great history behind it, that maybe doesn't belong to a brand name that you recognize. That is not cheap and throwaway, but rather something of quality that's going to last a long time. And it's a watch that you are wearing because it speaks to you on a deeper level. So this is just a handful of things that I wish I had known years before. And there are so many other options that I know you'll probably also add. Like for example, going down the pre-owned route instead of buying brand new, chasing after watches that already have been owned. Learning all of these things is a part of the journey. That's what makes it so fun, and what it's given me is that I can share these thoughts with you. I can share it with someone who's maybe new to this hobby, who's never thought of this before, and give them a slightly easier ride down this treacherous road. Maybe save them from making a few expensive mistakes. So what are the things you wish you knew before you started collecting watches? I'm sure there are going to be a couple of fatalists saying, don't do it, just don't do it. And I would agree, it's a love-hate thing for sure. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. I'll see you in the next one.